All right. Well, welcome. We are just on the cusp of what I think is going to be a really fun study for the congregation, as well as for myself. And it is on the Enneagram. And I will admit, this study came more through you two than it did through me, but it is something that each of us were introduced to in our seminary time. And it's a personality typing, would you say, characteristics. But what I've found important about it is it's not prescriptive, but it's descriptive, meaning it doesn't box you in and force you into this area, but more you might recognize yourself living it out. And it gets to the heart of kind of who we are, so we can be in relationship with one another. And interesting enough, we are all different numbers.
Different strengths, different weaknesses, different things to bring to the table in our role at First Lutheran, and I would say in our identities as parents and siblings and partners and all the different areas of our lives.
Yeah, because your whole family did this together as adults.
Yes, we did. And it's been actually very formational for us in our conversations with each other. Part of the Enneagram that I found really helpful is that it allows you to identify some of your underlying motivations. So why is it that I do the things that I do, or why do I make some of the choices that I make? And not all of them, of course, but it helps kind of paint a broader brush, a broader stroke, and that has been really, really helpful in family relationships.
Just curious, because I've kind of labeled my family. As I'm reading through, I'm thinking, oh, you're this, oh, you're that. And for my children and I don't think any of us are the same. Even though we're coming from the same tree, I don't think any of us are the same. Do you have the same in like you and a parent, or sibling and a parent, or siblings?
Yes, my family repeats itself. And I would say, well, I don't want to out anyone's Enneagram number, but I will say that we do repeat ourselves quite a bit, actually. So who knows? I mean, probably has a lot to do with life experiences too.
We touch, meaning we'll get into the language of it, but we wing each other, or we're opposite and we touch that way, but actually being the same number. So we're probably ahead of ourselves. Could you tell us a little bit about, like, where does it come from? Is it voodoo?
Maybe we should tell them who we are.
Oh, we'd probably do that too.
I'm Pastor Kayla.
I'm Pastor Emily.
I'm Pastor Corey. And there are 9 numbers to the Enneagram.
There are.
What does that mean? Where do these numbers come from?
Well, and part of what's fun about this is a lot of the other personality types, we know kind of how they came. They're named after a person. And what we're learning with this one is there's not a clear direction on where this necessarily came from. There's a lot of history, but it's not nailed down history that says this is exactly when this originated. It kind of became popular in the late 60s with one of the priests who took it back to Loyola and used it with other seminarians and priests, which is probably why we heard a lot about it in our seminary studies. But ultimately it comes from Greek, meaning 9 and like a figure. And so we'll be able to show that figure and understand how these 9 numbers work together. Whether it's working across the circles or with the ones next to us, like you already mentioned, in different times of what we're experiencing during parts of our life.
So when I read, some believe that, we're talking centuries old, and that origin story not really being known, but one of those things that kind of got passed down, and I find that fascinating. Some point to a Christian root to the whole thing. Even maybe I had read one place, the desert prophets, the desert priests, that contemplative area.
I feel like, so the Enneagram is not necessarily a personality like typing system, but it's more a way about, or a tool for you to use to help you figure out what your motivations are, why it is, and how it is that you move through the world. But it's like a way of thinking and categorizing that leaves room for the Holy Spirit. It feels like there is more space. It's not just like Myers-Briggs,
Right.
4 letters that lock you into a box. And so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's one of the reasons that we have all found it really helpful, is because you're not necessarily typed into one of these 9 numbers either, but oftentimes you can see yourself reflected in the wings, the numbers on either side of you. You'll learn more about this in the class, but there are different like numbers that you gravitate towards when you're stressed or when you're in like a really healthy emotional place. So you can kind of really see yourself maybe in a lot more of it than you would expect.
And
which
we
is
learn
neat.
more about how we relate to others, right? I mean, I think that's one of the special pieces about this is in learning more about ourselves, we also learn more about how we relate to others and how we can better understand others, which is this piece of the Holy Spirit too. What is it that the Holy Spirit's driving us to do with the gifts that we have? In one of the books that we're using, there was a quote about how what we don't know about ourselves can hurt us and can hurt others. And I think that is such an important piece because this really is a time to encourage self-reflection and to think about, as you mentioned, what are the things that motivate us and why do we do, and what are the things that make us tick and want to do better, or what are the areas that maybe I need to focus on and prioritize to help me be in better relationship with those who are around me, or to grow in my relationship with God and try to navigate some of this without necessarily being put in that box, but saying, here are some ways that this might change and some ways that I can grow as a person and grow in my relationships.
Yes, because we're holistic people.
Yeah, and it's not all flattering,
It is not.
but yet it's not all devastating either. So, one of the numbers that I will talk about, 2 characters that have this number, one kind of healthy, one unhealthy, Joseph Stalin and Martin Luther King Jr.
Very different people.
Very different in how they looked at the world and lived in the world.
Yeah.
So we don't take offense at when our shortcomings are kind of pointed out, but we also see where our strengths, because we all do have strengths and weaknesses. I think also part of that ancient history or unknown history is when we look at different books, they use different language to describe the different numbers, and so they even put different titles on the language. How we kind of started in preparing for the class was we each got a book, and we read the book, and 2 of them are by the same authors, or led,
co-written,
co-written, but the one who took the lead is different in, I believe, the 2 books. And you've got kind of the tome.
This is the original book. So this is the Enneagram: A Christian Perspective, and it was written by Richard Rohr and Andreas Ebert. And this is kind of like, I can't remember when this came out exactly, but this is like the sort of textbook for Enneagram studies for folks coming at this from a Christian perspective. Yeah, because Richard Rohr is like very well known in the Christian community on large. I think he's a Jesuit priest, I want to say. Boy, I might be getting his order incorrect. But just a really interesting person with a long history of thinking about contemplation and how the Enneagram fits into that.
And a very rich and deep book. Not necessarily surface entry level.
Yes.
That's if you really want to get into the grit of what we're talking about.
So what we've chosen kind of as the basis of this class is this book. It's called The Road Back Home, an Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery by Cron and Suzanne. Is it Stabile? Stabile? I apologize in advance to Suzanne. But this one's more about knowing yourself so that then you can be in relationship to others. a little bit more. And so if I was going to encourage a book to read, and this is what our class will be on, but it's not a necessity to have the book for the class. We'll do introductory videos just like we're doing with this kind of overarching one. But we'll talk about, kind of base it off of this. But then you've got a companion that you're using for befrienders.
Yeah, so after that one, there's called The Path Between Us. And The Path Between Us is just by Suzanne. And she focuses a lot on how these numbers interact with each other. And so throughout this book, there's entire descriptors of if you're a 1, this is how you relate to 2 through 9. Or if you're a 2, this is how you relate to 1s and 3 through 9s. And talks about ways that we can better live into a relationship. It talks about things we can control in our relationships, things we can't control in our relationships, tips for interacting with those different types. And so this one really is a follow-up after you kind of understand who you are and what your number is. This is a great companion to go with it as far as the understanding self and the understanding relationship. They mesh very well in that way. And both of these have podcasts that we can tune into as well. So we'll have resources as part of the course and make those available as we go too for people who are wanting to learn more.
This is making me think, friends, that maybe it would be a good thing to give a brief description or at least the titles of some of the titles of those 9 numbers, just so people have kind of a sense of what we're talking about. Because we are really good at describing things in depth and then forgetting that we are we are talking to
I was just going to say, let's jump to about 30,000 feet and
overview.
And take an overview. So Tyler, if you could pop up the slide which has the numbers and the arrows, which may be a little confusing now. And do you want to run through?
Yes, happy to. Okay, so 9 different types, 9 kind of personality styles. Pastor Kayla mentioned that the word Enneagram in Greek means 9 and figure, so those 2 words put together. Each of these 9 numbers identifies a very distinct way that human beings see the world. And also helps us to identify some of the underlying motivations that influence why it is that we do the things that we do. So a great description of this that I read, I believe actually in the book that we're using, is imagine that you are walking into the paint aisle, like at your local store, and you're looking for the color red, and then you see in front of you a whole wall of different shades of red and different colors of red and different vibrancies. And that's just one example that articulates you could be one number on the Enneagram, perhaps you're number 1, but number 1s come in like every sort of shade and color and strength and variety possible. So it might be that as you are like participating in this class, as you are reading through the Enneagram information, you connect with some of it, you connect with other pieces. Some pieces you don't connect with at all, so that's really important to keep in mind. This is just a brief overview, but if you see on that on the picture on your screen, you have 9 numbers. They're kind of in a circle, a shape with some lines in the middle, and you'll see that at the top is number 9. Number 9 is usually called the peacemaker, and then we're going to move over to number 1, which is the perfectionist, and number 2, the helper, number 3, the performer, number 4, the romantic, number 5, the investigator, number 6, the loyalist, number 7, the enthusiast, and number 8, the challenger. So those are the 9 numbers. They relate together in different ways. There are things called triads or kind of centers of intelligence. There are, again, our stresses and security numbers. This is a complex system, but I think the complexity is sort of the beauty in it also, because it allows us to see ourselves and others from a whole bunch of different angles. So that's a little bit about the Enneagram, just a brief outline.
Yeah, and because we're kind of following a book, we'll let them take the lead on what they think is kind of the important stuff, like what does a 1 look like in relationship? Maybe what does a 1 look like at work, or what does a 1 look like when they're a child? It is, I just think, so important. We hear it all the time where the first 18 years of our life, they don't shadow the rest, but they definitely play a part in the rest of our lives, in who we are. You
They
know,
have
you hear
influence.
of 80-some-year-old people talking back, and the stuff they're talking about is these shaping events that happened when they were children. So, of course, that's a piece of it. Also, it's good to note, and it was just kind of briefly mentioned, that there's like healthy numbers, and then you can be an unhealthy in years, or you can be an average. And again, it's not one shade. We're all different shades.
And one spot we see that is in the triads. So, right, this is based off 3 triads. We have the gut, we have the heart, and we have the mind. And so where is our motivation coming from is part of the conversation that we'll have. And so when we think about the triads, there's like the anger or the gut triad, which involves numbers 8, 9, and 1. And then we have this feeling or the heart triad, so the people who are coming from their heart in everything they do, which are 2, 3, and 4. And then the head, so the people who are the thinkers, thinking through everything, which are 5, 6, and 7. And so looking at how those motivate and how it shifts how we respond will be an important part of this as well.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I think it will be great. Anything else that we need to say in this? Oh, the self-assessment.
Yeah.
Yes.
So at the end of this video, there'll be a link that you can push on to take a little test. And all this test does is it says, you know, we think you're a this. And then as we go through the class, and if you read any books about it, you'll kind of say, yeah, you know, I think you're right. Or like in your case, the one that the test showed, yeah, those are really strong in me, but I really think I'm more of this other number. And so.
And I think it's important to note that when you're doing this assessment, right, it's not a sit and ponder this. It's a go with your gut. It's not to necessarily think through and rationalize every single question. It's if you're reading this question, what does your gut tell you you are?
What's your first response? Yep.
Because that really helps us to think about what our motivation is and what our instincts are, as opposed to maybe what they should be or what we think they should be.
Yes.
And so,
If I'm a good person, what would my answer be? Yeah, it's not that.
So it shouldn't take, probably more than 15 minutes. But the goal is to go with your gut as you're going through this and to see where it comes. And one of the great things about this assessment is it gives us multiple numbers. So it gives us our top 2, and it will give us details about our one that they perceive to be our number 1. But it also rank order the remaining 7. So we can kind of see how the types play into our life, which will help to guide some of that further discernment as we go through to say, I'm probably not what my very bottom one is if it's, 10%. But if I have, 60, 3 of them at 60, it might be very different.
Was it correct with you?
Definitely. It was correct.
And it
Yes.
was correct with me. And your 1 is one of your top 2.
Well, and mine are interesting because mine was 100% on one of them and 97% on another, determined in the final questions. And so it put my 97% as my number 1, even though
The other one's 100%.
the discernment has probably established the 100% really is who I am.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that all plays out too and talk more about that.
Anything else for this session?
Just that it's going to be awesome.
It's going to
You
be
should
fun.
Join us.
Join us Sundays, Wednesdays, different number every week. And this will be our focus through Lent. So.
All right. Thank you very much.